Chapter 32. A Glimpse of the Underworld. One day while I was in prayer, I suddenly found myself plunged into hell. The Lord had long ago begun to grant me exalted states of prayer. I didn't know how I had ended up here. Then I realized that the Lord wanted me to catch a glimpse of where a life of sin leads. The whole experience only lasted for the twinkling of an eye, but it made such an impression on me that I don't think I could ever forget it, even if I were to live for many years. The entrance to hell looked like a long, narrow alley or a low, dark furnace. The floor was covered with filthy mud that emitted a noxious stench. It was swarming with disgusting vermin. There was a small hole like a cupboard, scooped out of the wall at the end of the alley. I found myself stuffed into it. Compared to what I felt then, what I had been seeing was pleasant. I cannot exaggerate what it was like. I experienced a fire in my soul that I could never begin to describe. I have suffered grave physical ailments in this lifetime. During that time when I became paralyzed, all my nerves were constricted. Doctors have told me that the excruciating pain I have endured is the worst a human being can bear here on earth. And the devil has also caused me terrible suffering, but nothing compared to what I experienced in hell. The thought that this pain would go on without end and never cease compounded my suffering. Yet even this paled compared to the anguish of my soul. I was strangled and suffocating. The agonizing despair was so intense that it's impossible to find words strong enough to describe it. It would be inadequate to say that it's as if the soul were being unrelentingly torn from the body. That would make it sound like someone else was stealing the life from the soul. The truth is, the soul herself is tearing herself into pieces. I simply don't know how to convey the fury of that inward fire and hopeless misery. It far exceeds the most intense pain and torment we could imagine. I felt as though I were being crushed and scorched, yet I couldn't see who was inflicting this on me. But the worst part, as I said, was the inner fire and despair. I found it impossible either to sit or lie down in the horrific hole. The walls, hideous and cramped, seemed to be closing in on themselves, blotting out everything. There is no light in that place. Everything is enveloped in the densest darkness. Yet everything that is painful to see was fully visible to me. I don't understand how this can be so. It was not the Lord's will for me to see any more of hell at that time. Since then, I have had other frightening visions that depicted what would happen if I continued to indulge in certain vices. But even though these things seemed more dreadful, they were not accompanied by that racking physical pain, so they did not terrorize me as much. In the vision of hell, the Lord wanted me to experience the spiritual torments and afflictions in a visceral way, as if my body were actually involved. I don't know how such a thing can be true, but I believe the Lord was doing me a big favor by giving me this glimpse of the underworld and letting me see with my own eyes the fate from which His mercy had delivered me. Reading an account of this is nothing compared to the reality of the experience. Sometimes I have purposely tried to think about certain torments, like demons tearing off my flesh with their pincers or various other forms of torture I've read about. But I don't do well with fearful thoughts. Still, nothing comes close to the excruciating pain I felt in hell. It is altogether different from anything that can be experienced on earth. Being burned alive here in this world is nothing compared to blazing in the fires of that world. This experience left me terrified. I still feel horror now, almost 6 years later. As I write about this, a chill creeps into my bones and makes me tremble. Looking back, I cannot think of a single trial I have experienced in this lifetime that can measure up to that fleeting taste of the underworld. We have no reason to complain about mundane problems. The Lord did me a big favor when He plunged me into hell. It helped put the tribulations and contradictions of this life into perspective for me. It gave me the strength to suffer these things. It also renewed my gratitude toward God, who liberated me from everlasting torment. Everything else seems easy now. It astonishes me that even after I had read books that described the horrors of hell, I didn't take them seriously. What was I thinking? How could I possibly have found pleasure in anything that was leading me to that dreadful place? Oh, my God, may you be forever blessed. It is clear to me now that you loved me more than I loved myself. How many times, my beloved, have you freed me from that dark prison only to have me defy you by locking myself up all over again? This is what makes me so sad for all the souls who have fallen into disgrace. I want to help them return, especially those who have been baptized and are already lovers of Christ. I would willingly suffer 1,000 deaths if it meant I could set even one such soul free from such terrible torture. Think about it. Whenever someone we love in a special way suffers here on earth, our very nature moves us to compassion. If their trial is severe, we ourselves suffer. Who, then, could bear to see any soul suffer the never-ending fires of the underworld? No heart could possibly endure this without breaking. In this world, we know that life is finite and any affliction will eventually be relieved by death. Yet we are still moved to deep compassion by the suffering of others. How can we rest knowing that so many souls are facing endless agony in that other world? How can we stand by while the spirit of evil carries away so many souls every day? This vision also makes me wish that we would all do everything in our power to avoid this outcome for ourselves. Let us neglect nothing, and may it be the Lord's will to give us the grace to serve Him in all ways. It strikes me that no matter how badly I sometimes behaved, my intentions were always good. I cared deeply about being of service to God. I didn't do certain things that I see other people do so carelessly, as if they didn't mean a thing. Plus, I have suffered grave illnesses very patiently. Of course, the Lord Himself gave me this patience. I was not inclined to gossip or criticize other people. I never wished anything bad on anybody. And I don't remember ever being so envious that my feelings would be offensive to the Lord. There were several other good things I did, because even though I was wretched, I was always in awe of God. Yet, in spite of all this, look where the evil spirits took me. And my transgressions probably earned me an even worse fate than the one I glimpsed. The torture was unbearable. It is a dangerous thing to become self-satisfied. It's too easy to fall into grave error with every step. For the love of God, we constantly need to be vigilant about missing the mark. The Lord will help us. He helped me. May it be God's will never to release me from His hand. We know where I will end up. Being who He is, may He keep me from falling. Amen. The Lord, in His mercy, showed me this and other secret things. It was His will for me to understand the glory He gives to the good and the pain that the wicked must endure. I was anxious to find out how I could make amends for the bad things I had done and earn back the goodness I may have forfeited. I had this urge to get away from people and completely withdraw from the world. My spirit was restless, yet it was a delightful kind of disquiet and not a disturbing one. It was obvious that this gentle anxiety came from God. His Majesty was heating up my soul so that I could more readily digest the tough meats He was feeding me. I was thinking about what I could do for God. It occurred to me that one of the first things would be to follow the call to the monastic life His Majesty had given me more authentically and try to honor my vows as perfectly as possible. There were many servants of God at the Incarnation who were sincerely dedicated to Him. Nevertheless, to the extent that was appropriate to their religious vocation, sometimes they needed to stay somewhere else for a while. Our community was poor, and the sisters endured constant hardship. Also, our convent did not strictly observe the rules of our order, but then neither did the rest of the order. It seemed to me that our monastery was quite comfortable. It was spacious and pleasant. I think the ease of life there was a disadvantage. I was just as inclined to leave as anyone. But this was because there were certain nuns our superiors found it impossible to refuse, and they liked to have me near them. When the superiors were cajoled into it, they would often order me to go along. Thus, as a result of my vow of obedience, I wasn't home very much. I suspect the spirit of evil had something to do with this. Since I was sharing the things I was learning about the spiritual path with some of my sisters, he was trying to thwart the good that came from this. One day, I was talking with a small group of women about the lack of spiritual depth at the Incarnation. We expressed our yearning to live and practice prayer like the ancient desert fathers and mothers. "If we can't go to the desert," Maria said, "why can't we found a little monastery of our own with just a few sisters, where we could live an austere life of prayer together?" Maria's question echoed my own desires. I began to discuss the idea with Doña Guiomar, the widowed lady I have mentioned, because I knew she shared this vision. She immediately set about trying to secure the funds necessary to establish the new house and provide it with a modest income. I see now that our initial plan did not have much chance of materializing, but our longing made us think it was a viable one. The truth is, I was perfectly content at the Incarnation. All my needs were met, and my cell was just the way I liked it. So I think I was holding back a little from making such a radical move. Still, we agreed to pray about it with deep intention and see what God had in mind for us. One day, after communion, His Majesty spoke to me. "You must strive with all your might to make this dream of a new monastery come true," he said. "I promise it will not fail to thrive, and it will be of great service to me." He told me we should call it St. Joseph's. "St. Joseph will keep watch over one door," he said, "and Our Lady at the other. Christ will live among you. This place will be a star that will radiate its light everywhere." The Lord went on to remind me that even though we were correct to strive for radical simplicity, conventional monasteries were not bad places. They served Him too. What would become of the world, he asked, if there weren't people willing to detach from material pursuits and assume a life of prayer? Finally, he commanded me to tell my confessor what he had ordained. He said I should make it clear that God did not want Father Balthasar to go against the plan or prevent me from acting on it. This vision had a powerful effect on me. God's voice was so clear that I could not possibly doubt He had really spoken to me. He had partly revealed the severe trials and trouble that founding a new monastery would cause me, and the thought of facing all this caused me intense pain. I was very happy at the Incarnation. Until this vision, I had treated the idea somewhat casually. I had not approached it with the determination and confidence necessary to bring it into being. I felt as if a heavy burden was being placed on my shoulders. When I realized that my calm life was about to be shattered, I didn't know what to do. But the Lord returned again and again to speak to me about this new monastery. He gave me so many clear reasons and explanations that I could no longer doubt that it was His will for me to carry it through. This gave me the courage to write a letter to my confessor, telling him everything that had happened. Father Balthasar did not dare to tell me to forget the whole thing, but he did not consider it feasible. From a strictly rational standpoint, he did not believe it would work, since Doña Guiomar, who had offered to support the new house, did not have the practical means for doing so. He told me to speak with the Provincial of Castile about the matter. My companion, Doña Guiomar, spoke with the provincial instead. The provincial of Castile was very sympathetic to the contemplative life. He loved the idea and offered her his unconditional support. He said he would be happy to have such a monastery under his jurisdiction. They discussed the income the house would require. For a number of reasons, we decided our monastery would never have more than 13 residents. Later, we ended up lifting the restriction on numbers. Before we went any further, we consulted the holy friar Pedro de Alcántara. We informed him of everything that was happening. Do not give up on this, he urged us. He offered his advice on how to found a monastic community. No sooner did word of our plans spread through the city than persecution came raining down on us. It was so intense that I cannot begin to describe it. People spread all kinds of gossip about us. They ridiculed us. They declared the idea absurd. They said I should just leave things as they were. And they gave my companion such a hard time that it completely wore her down. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't help but wonder if they were right. Wearied to my core, I prayed to God, and His Majesty began to console and encourage me. Now you can see the suffering the saints who founded religious orders had to endure, he said. There is much more persecution still to come. You must not let it bother you. And then he told me some things to convey to my companion. What amazed me most was how his words instilled such deep comfort in us that we found the courage to stand up to all the abuse. There was hardly a person throughout the greater spiritual community who was not hostile to our cause. In fact, the whole city seemed to be against us. Everyone seemed to think the project was completely foolish. The outcry and negative talk from my own monastery was so excessive that the provincial decided it would be imprudent to oppose them. So he changed his mind and withdrew his support. The income is too small, he explained, and the opposition is too great. All things considered, he seemed to be right. So our most influential advocate abandoned the project and refused to sanction it. For those of us who had already been the target of violent blows, this was a painful rejection. Especially for me. With the provincial behind me, people had taken me seriously. As for my companion, they threatened that unless she abandoned the idea, they would refuse to give her absolution. They blamed her for creating a scandal. Terribly upset by these accusations, Doña Guiomar confided in a very learned Dominican named Pedro Ibáñez. Actually, she had been giving him a full account of our plans and soliciting his advice from the beginning, even before the provincial turned his back on us. He was one of the only people who did not dismiss our project as a mere whim. Doña Guiomar shared all the details with Father Ibáñez, including how much income she could expect from her estate. She told him she had nowhere else to turn, and she fervently hoped he would help us. After all, she said, he was the most learned man in all of Avila. Then I told Father Ibáñez all the things we were thinking of doing and explained the reasons behind them. I avoided mentioning anything about my revelations and relied on the rational arguments for our case. I saw no cause for complicating things with the supernatural source of my impulse. I will give you an answer in 8 days, he told us, and then he asked, Are you determined to do whatever I tell you? Yes, said Doña Guiomar. Yes, I said. I agreed to this because I knew there was no other way to go forward with the project. But in truth, I never doubted for a moment that the monastery would be founded. My companion had even more faith than I. Nothing anyone said could have dissuaded her from our cause. I simply found it impossible to consider the notion of giving up. Since the vision did not in any way go against sacred scripture or break any of the religious rules we were compelled to observe, I believed it must be a true revelation. Although I was certain we were dealing with a divinely ordained venture, I'm also certain that I would have obeyed the Dominican if he had come to the conclusion that we would be offending God by following through on our plan. All he would have needed to do was tell me we were doing something that defied the demands of good conscience, and I would have sought some other way to respond to the urgings of my Lord. But my Lord did not offer any alternative. This great servant of God later admitted to me that he was fully determined when we came to him to insist that we give up the foundation. He had heard too many rumors and was convinced that the project was untenable. When a certain important gentleman found that you had come to me, he went on, he warned me to be careful of you and advised me to refuse to help you. But as Father Ibanez began to search his own soul and consider what kind of an answer he would give us, he reflected more deeply on the matter and turned his attention to our true motivation. He realized how determined we were to live a deeper spiritual life and saw that our foundation could not help but be of great service to God. So, after the 8 days, Father Ibanez said, "Go ahead and found that monastery, and do it quickly." He told us how to bring the project to fruition. "Your resources may be limited," he said, "but you have to trust in God for something." Then he said, "If anyone tries to stop you, send them to me. I'll deal with it." And Father Ibanez never did let us down. His reply was very comforting to us. A number of very pious people who had been in opposition to us revised their attitude because of Father Ibanez's support. Some of them even helped us. Among them was that saintly gentleman, Don Francisco, who changed his mind and decided that the impetus could come from God. His only concern had been one of practicality. He couldn't see how we would pull it off, but he knew that prayer was our entire basis for wanting to found this monastery. Because he was so holy, he recognized that even though it was likely to be terribly difficult, our plan carried the potential for great perfection. It seems that the Lord himself transformed Don Francisco's opinion, and he did the same thing for the learned cleric Gaspar Daza. Father Daza is one of the men I mentioned with whom I had spoken at the beginning. Everyone in Avila looks up to him. God keeps him there as a positive example to help guide many souls. He, too, stepped up to help me with this endeavor. Now, with the assistance of many prayers, we had arrived at a crucial junction. We made an offer on a house in a good section of town. It was small, but that didn't trouble me. His Majesty had told me to get started and simply do the best I could. "Soon you will see what I will do for you," he said. And how well I have seen it. So although I was well aware that we had almost no money, I believed the Lord would help us and arrange other ways for us to thrive.